Welcome to today's Historical Explainer. We're going to jump right in and take a highly structured, step-by-step approach to analyze one of the absolute most defining eras in American history, the Great Depression and Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal. Now, for all you history students tuning in, we're treating this as a practical, hands-on guide. Your specific task today is to evaluate exactly how these completely unprecedented policies reached into and reshaped the daily lives of ordinary, everyday citizens.
Okay, here is our syllabus for this session. We've got 6 sections to cover. Crisis and the Forgotten Man. Step 1, immediate relief. Step 2, economic recovery. Step 3, long-term reforms, followed by criticism and resistance, and we'll wrap it all up with the legacy of the New Deal.
All right, Section 1, Crisis and the Forgotten Man. Because to really grasp the stakes of 1932, we have to recognize that the entire American economic system felt like it was on the absolute verge of total collapse.
Imagine this. It's 1932, and an unprecedented 1 in 4 workers is jobless. We're talking over 11 million people completely out of work. That staggering 25% unemployment rate created this intense atmosphere of widespread poverty, the desperate hoarding of whatever cash people had, and just total public panic. The traditional, hands-off methods of government intervention, they simply were not working anymore.
So FDR focuses his campaign directly on this very specific demographic, the forgotten man. You know, the ordinary Americans struggling with severe economic hardship, the workers, the farmers, the unemployed, who felt totally overlooked by both the government and private industry. FDR essentially promised a complete, ground-up overhaul of how the federal government responded to human suffering.
So how exactly did he pull that off? Let's move to step 1, immediate relief, focusing on his famous first 100 days in office, where the immediate goal was, well, simply to stop the bleeding.
FDR tackled the crisis using a brilliant yet simple 3-step framework known as the 3 Rs, creating this experimental, real-time manual to rescue the nation. First up was relief, which meant providing immediate jobs and financial aid. Second was recovery, to stimulate industry and agriculture. And third was reform, the goal being to establish long-term, permanent societal safety nets.
A prime example of that immediate relief was the Civilian Conservation Corps, or the CCC. To get people help quickly, the government essentially created jobs out of thin air. And it worked. The incredibly popular CCC employed roughly 3 million young men for some seriously grueling physical labor. We're talking planting millions of trees, fighting wildfires, draining swamps. It was this massive, coordinated effort to conserve both human dignity and the nation's natural resources at the same time.
But as you analyze this, remember that these programs weren't without friction. Take agencies like the Works Progress Administration, for instance. While they built critical infrastructure and funded public artists, critics openly mocked the WPA with this quote, claiming it stood for "We Provide Alms." And that perfectly captures the early tension between necessary relief and the very real fear of frivolous make-work. Yet for the workers themselves, it was fundamentally about preserving their self-respect through honest public labor.
Okay. Now that the immediate relief was deployed, let's move right into step 2, economic recovery, where the goal was completely restarting the engines of industry and agriculture.
Now, this era was absolutely full of controversial paradoxes. For example, the Agricultural Adjustment Administration created something called artificial scarcity. Get this, the government literally paid farmers to destroy food and slaughter livestock during a time of widespread national hunger. It sounds crazy, right? But the strategy was to force agricultural market prices back up to a level where those farmers could actually survive.
Meanwhile, on the industrial and infrastructure front, we have the Tennessee Valley Authority. The TVA stepped in and completely modernized an impoverished region roughly the size of England. It brought full employment, generated super affordable hydroelectric power, and controlled massive, devastating flooding. It was a stunning success in regional planning, even though private utility companies fiercely criticized the whole thing as unfair, government-subsidized competition.
And that builds right into our third phase, Step 3, long-term reforms. Because the New Deal didn't just want to slap a bandage on the economy, it sought to construct permanent societal guardrails so a collapse of this magnitude would literally never happen again. Just look at how fast things moved. We're talking about a massive, rapid shift in American labor rights. Within just a 3-year window, the Wagner Act guaranteed the right to collectively bargain, the Social Security Act created old-age pensions, and the Fair Labor Standards Act established a federal minimum wage while finally banning oppressive child labor. This permanently changed the entire relationship between the worker, the employer, and the federal government.
Let's actually look a little closer at the Social Security Act. As America was rapidly urbanizing, this specific reform shifted the primary responsibility for citizen welfare away from extended rural family networks and placed it directly onto the federal government. It created an industrialized welfare system, acting as a permanent safety net for the elderly, the disabled, and the unemployed. A real game changer.
But as dedicated students of history, we absolutely must recognize that this transformation was not universally accepted. Let's dig into Section 5, Criticism and Resistance, and examine the fierce opposition to FDR's policies.
Here is a great practical exercise for you. Compare these two primary source perspectives impartially. On one hand, supporters genuinely believe the government had a strict moral duty to save its citizens, to balance the human budget and essentially save capitalism from itself. Conversely, opponents across the political spectrum saw a very frightening slide into either a socialist dictatorship, a permanent handout state, or just massive, unchecked bureaucratic waste.
And those political threats, they emerged from both extremes. FDR was facing intense pressure from all sides. Over on the left, populists like Senator Huey Long proposed massive wealth redistribution with his Share Our Wealth program. Meanwhile, on the right, wealthy industrialists and conservative groups like the American Liberty League accused FDR of being a traitor to his class and fought tooth and nail to dismantle the New Deal entirely.
So, what does FDR do when he faces resistance from the judicial branch? Well, by 1937, 6 of the 9 Supreme Court justices were over 70, and this conservative bloc just kept striking down his new laws. In response, FDR attempted a highly controversial court-packing scheme to bypass them by adding new, younger justices to the bench. It was widely viewed as a massive overreach of executive power that really shocked the American public. Plus, we have to look at the economic data objectively. Despite billions in deficit spending, the economy was still incredibly fragile. Yes, unemployment did drop significantly from 25% to 15%, but the sudden Roosevelt recession of 1937 proved that the underlying economic issues weren't completely fixed. The New Deal absolutely reduced human suffering, but it failed to completely cure the Depression on its own. And that brings us to our final section, the legacy of the New Deal. Let's step back and evaluate this era. What did all of this actually amount to for you, the students of today? Well, the step-by-step blueprint of the New Deal didn't single-handedly cure the economic crisis. The massive industrial production of World War II ultimately took care of that. However, it fundamentally rewired the entire machinery of the American government and the daily lives of its citizens. It realigned political voting blocs, it empowered unskilled labor, and it permanently established the modern American welfare state as we know it. So, I want to leave you with this final practical task for your own historical analysis. Write down whether you believe the New Deal's sweeping interventions actually saved the capitalist system from total collapse, or if they fundamentally and permanently altered the traditional American spirit of self-reliance. Think deeply about that as you continue your studies. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.